Hi, Rodrigo. Welcome to Grape Collective. Thanks for joining us.
Lisa, thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Can you tell me about your background and how you got into winemaking?
Well, my background started as a young adult. I will say even before that, in my teenage years, I was working as a waiter in a French restaurant in a vacational town during my summer times in Chile. And I always got asked, at the time, Psalms were not in the floor and it was not common. There are not that many wines to recommend, but I find myself buying my first wine guide to know what to recommend to the clients, to the customers. And that's how I start clicking with wine in a certain way, in a more professional way. Wine was always at the table at my house, and I was always familiar with it. That together with my interest of being outdoors and not seeing myself confined in an office for my future or as a professional. So that's how I choose agronomy for my studies in university down in Chile at the Universidad Católica. And through that process of studying agronomy, I realized that there was an opportunity, or one of the paths was to be a winemaker and viticulturalist. So that's how it all started. But what really triggers my interest was the possibility to travel abroad. My thesis, and I was not a very good student in terms of grade, my thesis was assigned based on your priority grades. So as my grades were poor, I get a leftover thesis subject, and it was on organic farming.
Oh, wow.
At the time was not the preferred by the other students and by my classmates. And I started reading and researching, and I had my first career conflict at that moment because I realized that what I have studied was not going to work for me because I was way more interested in working with nature rather than against nature. So I did my research on the only 2 acres that were farmed organically at the time in the country.
Wow.
With a winery named Carmen, which winemaker was Alvaro Espinosa. And it happens that Carmen at the time was imported to the US by Brown and Forman at the time. Big house, but they used to own Fetzer. And Fetzer was a pioneer in organics at the time. And through those connections, Alvaro put me in contact with Paul Dolan. And Paul Dolan was very kind to accept my internship for 8 months and go and learn about organic farming. And when I was at Fetzer in late 90s, I met somebody that was key in my career. And his name was Alan York. And Alan, he was the biodynamic consultant for Fetzer and a few others at the time. And we connect really well, and we became friends. And that's how I start finding my path. Then I went to New Zealand, which I thought it was a phenomenal experience. Met a lot of great people. And then I came back to work with Jimmy Fetzer, where Alan was permanent consultant and Alvaro Espinosa was the winemaker consultant for that. So all that together is how I started getting interested in a combination of winemaking and farming. For me, the farming became way more relevant than the winemaking techniques very early in my career.
So, and now you and your wife, Mai, have started your own project called Farm Mountain. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, well, after many years, both of us working in the industry, we were always curious. We have been back and forth in between Chile and California multiple times. And what we admire always about the Californian industry and Napa and Sonoma is that everybody that we met, they have their little side project. And they always they have that entrepreneur aspect. And we thought, why not? So when we got an incredible opportunity to come back and start working in Napa, we immediately thought this is the time that we should do our own little project. And we start doing it on weekends and after hours. But it happens that, as you know, every little project like that start giving you tremendous satisfaction. And it was not, I would not say it was not a distraction. It just gave me more energy to do more things. But I realized that at a certain point, I I have to commit to my own project. And that was part of hopefully my destiny of what I was doing.
So you work with growers in 2 different Sonoma AVAs, correct?
Correct.
Can you tell us about those AVAs and what
Yes.
makes them unique?
So when I worked in California before, I worked for an incredible family, for the Benzingers, and they were pioneers in biodynamic farming as well. My wife at the time was working for the Huneeus family for the Chilean project. So we lived in Napa, and my commute was through the Mayacamas every day, through Trinity Road. And I was always looking at these vineyards in the mountain that, who's farming here? I was questioning to myself. And this is kind of incredible. And it was kind of a meditational phase because it's a very windy road that it gets you kind of a little dizzy if you don't drive at the right speed. So that, when I thought about an appellation and a place, I connect a couple of things. Those brilliant memories from my drives through Trinity Road, together with what I believe is very important, which is the rock component in wines. I think rocks, it what gives you electricity, verticality, vitality, elements like that in wine. I think so important. It's so important in the world of plush wines. I mean, tension and acidity are crucial in my opinion, and I think that that's what you find in the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
So I work with the Moon Mountain District, which is a new appellation, started in 2013, and I reconnect with a lot of growers that I have met before. And knocking on doors, I get the chance to reconnect with them and work with incredible fruit. Most of them planted in the 70s, in many cases dry farmed, and vineyards that are older than myself, which is a kind of a very special and a very respectful approach.
And how does your experience and knowledge of organic and biodynamics inform what you're doing today?
That's a great question, Lisa, because of course today the component of the farming aspect in the mountains is very, very challenging. Personally, I believe that organics and biodynamics is the farming of the future. I have no doubt in my mind on that. But also I realize that I gotta be respectful with tradition. And sometimes those are not being the aspects that comes with the tradition of the place. So I'm working very close with the growers that are not believers in order to help them transition to this new phase, which is organics. And I also am very lucky to work with people like Phil Couturi, that they are established organic and biodynamic growers. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of sources, but definitely, that's my contribution as well, that I'm gonna be transforming those vineyards with time. It will be easier for me to go and only source what it's already done. Mm-hmm. But I think that the beauty of this process and growing with the region is help them convert as well.
And do you find in those high elevation mountainous area that they're having as much issues with climate change as, the lower in the valley?
I think that we all are seeing that. And of course, it's a term that for whatever reason we are slowly adopting. I think it's very important to understand that this extremes that we're seeing in weather, you got to be very proactive in your actions, but also it becomes so much more relevant to help vines adapt. And how you do that? Well, making them sensitive to the environment where they live. There's a beautiful saying in biodynamic farming, which is, as the plant kingdom doesn't have the capacity to move around, they're committed to the place where they live. So what they do is that they mirror their environment, which when you think about it, the plants have the capacity to read the signals before we do. Mm. When you respect them and let them age with grace, just like us, you can react to situations in a very different way. And I think that it's us who needs to help them through our changes. Our farming needs to be adapted to the climate change situation. Our winemaking needs to be adapted as well. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, we tend to look at those two by separate.
And tell me about the grapes that you grow and the wines that you make.
Well, we are focused on only two very traditional grapes, and the Cabernet Sauvignon that It was introduced to the region, believe it or not, in the late 1800s by the first settlers that arrived to Glen Ellen in 1860, 1870. And they brought some of the Bordeaux varieties, specifically Cabernet Sauvignon, as probably with that rusticity that Cabernet can have and adaptability, it's what it was planted in the hillsides. And I love that because when you make and you taste the wines that we make, it's like going back in time. You taste the old flavors of Cabernet in terms of that a little bit of a few edges here and there, but bright acidity that makes them feel fresh and at the same time versatile. And the other variety that we work with is high elevation Chardonnay with a very specific vineyard that we feel incredibly lucky because it's a dry farm Chardonnay that lives at 1,800 feet. I never worked with anything like that before. So it's very exciting and brings elements like salinity or other elements that makes it quite special and different from what I have worked with before, with any other region.
How would you describe the taste of your wines to someone who's never had them before?
You know, I think that they are, in my opinion, they're very classic. The wines taste classic, but what classic means, I think that verticality is something that I consider important. What does that mean? I think that tannins that you can feel in your tongue, tannins that reminds me in some cases as the Piedmont, for example, that you get a little bit of like a scratch in your tongue, but in a gentle way, in a way that feels that it's harmonic. And at the same time with fruit, but I always say in the land of fruit, meaning Napa and Sonoma, no matter what you do, you get a lot of fruit. Spices, earthiness is scarce. When you get it, try to capture it. And Old Vines gives you a lot of that. So I feel very comfortable with that style of wines.
And tell me about the name, Far Mountain. How does that have meaning for you?
It has a lot of meaning because definitely has some nostalgia from where we come from. We're far from our roots. We're from Chile, me and my wife. But also we have this connection with the mountain from early on. We live at 1,400 feet in Santiago, where we grew up. But also the connection with the mountain feels like a leitmotif in our lives in the sense of connecting with the rocks, connecting with the underground, work with people like Pedro Parra in the past that had taught me to focus where the rocks are, because that's where you get the interesting flavors. And that's where you get the acidity, that's where you get the matchstick in the Chardonnay, that's where you get kind of the flint notes, and at the same time you get the chalkiness. We don't have calcareous soils, it's all volcanic, but you get our version of the rocks in the wines when you feel that little bite in the tongue that awakens the senses. And that's what we're trying to capture.
And what is your approach in the cellar?
It's very minimal. You know, winemaking, of course, you need to learn your techniques and know them very well, but it's a process. For me, it's the key is in the sources. It's in the places. There's a tendency to give way more importance to the winemaking rather than the farming. For me, it's the opposite. I think the farming is key, and the places, and the location, and the interpretation.
How do you see the evolution of Napa, California wines from the big, opulent, high alcohol wines to where they are now?
Yeah, I think that there are different trends today, but I will say let's be consistent with what we have been discussing. Start with the farming. And the farming, obviously, when you work with young vines and you are trying to farm them in a way that is perceived as high quality when everything is very straight, very organized, I will say the term very engineered. When you live in a Mediterranean area that has plenty of season, maximum sun exposure, my question to your question is that the right way of thinking about it? Together with a component that is very crucial to try to tune down the metabolism of the vines, which is age. You need to let plants age in order to calm down and be comfortable with themselves, so that we as farmers are less interventionists and way more observants of the situations. When we are intervening all the time, we're altering the metabolism of the plants. We're making ripening curves longer because we believe or think that we need extra time for the flavors to develop. What the plant needs is age rather than extra time in a season. When you push ripeness, there's always a trade-off. You accumulate sugars, you lose acids. You can add acid in the winery, but in my opinion, you lose the balance. So at the very end, it's how you create the right balance. I think that we need to mature as farmers in order to allow vines to age. Now, there's other pressures in the region, like disease pressure or virus pressure, that is forcing people to replant very often. That is a bigger problem. And I think that needs to be analyzed. But the idea of replanting often, or the age of the region that doesn't pass the 17 or 18 years old before replanting, that's a very serious issue to the aspect of making wines with less alcohol and more balance. I think that's a problem. And the other problem is cultural. I think that sometimes we like to talk about certain things, but we're not necessarily walking the talk. And I think that needs to happen as well.
Do you find it is happening? It's
slowly but surely it's happening. And it's not for everybody. I think that the style is very much defined, and people many times believe that they are known for something, and there's a lot of resistance to change. I think that time will tell, but obviously there's a new generation of winemakers that are trying to make the changes. And I think that is eventually happening. And it's going to be more diverse. I'm not saying everybody will go that direction, but I think it's creating a lot more diversity. In Sonoma, it's the same thing. I think that, but it's the amount of projects, it's a lot less that are thinking like that.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and I really enjoy our conversation.
Great, thank you.